Hey guys, Ricky here. It is another week of quarantine. A lot can happen in a week. I've been thinking about that. The restaurants have closed, the beaches and the parks are now closed in Laguna. Church is closed, although we're still online, which is awesome. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure for LBHS, but the school I student teach at University High School just closed through the end of the semester, at least through May 1st, they said. Although there's still some online work, so things are definitely in flux, which can be really confusing. Um, it's like you're home, but there's probably still some things that you need to be working on. And I'm sure it's hard to stay concentrating on things right now. But despite everything kind of closing to the public, I've seen a lot of ways that people have been really staying connected during this time, which is cool to see. So like I mentioned, we're doing this online church, which I really love. And that's loud. I've also seen a lot of people on social media kind of coming together and sharing like positive quotes or sort of things to encourage each other. There's some like social media challenges too that I've seen going around that are kind of funny. It's just a fun way to keep things a little bit lighthearted. I also know some of you might be doing online classes on Zoom or things like that. So we are kind of still seeing each other. But really, I just want to say that I recognize that there are a lot of emotions that you might be feeling this week. So maybe you are anxious and kind of have a lot of fear about the virus spreading. Or maybe your heart just feels heavy because you're really taking on the burdens of everyone else right now, or just kind of feeling that weight of the world. Maybe you're actually excited because it feels like an extended vacation or in-person school's been canceled. Or maybe you're kind of going crazy just being stuck in your house or with your family members 24/7, maybe if you don't all get along. Or maybe if you're like my husband, you're really stoked to try a bunch of hobbies that you've never had time to do before. Or again, on the opposite side of the spectrum, maybe you just feel kind of paralyzed, like you can't do anything, just paralyzed by the constant stream of news updates that we're getting, and kind of crippled by all this change and sense of uncertainty. And the reality is most of you probably feel some combination of all of those different things. So I just want to say that no matter where you are on that spectrum of emotions, that God is present in the midst of it. So I want us to take a second today to just stop what we're doing, to distract ourselves, and intentionally just welcome God into our space. So you don't have to do that now necessarily, but sometime today or tonight, just take a second to intentionally welcome God into your space. Yes, into your heart, but also just into your time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But God knows how you feel, and He wants to hear from you and connect with you. So we know that we are not promised a comfortable or straightforward life. But we are promised the presence and guidance of our Creator. We just finished reading Philippians a little bit ago in the back house, and we know from that suffering in this life is guaranteed, right? But that when we view it as a gift, we can grow and learn from it. So I was really thinking this past week, I was like, if anyone understands what it's like to be in quarantine, it's probably David from the Bible. David, as a young man, spent years hiding out in the wilderness. When he was a teenager, he had been anointed as king to replace Saul. And then he slew the huge warrior Goliath and was suddenly thrust into national fame. But King Saul's jealous rage really sent David running for his life to the hills, literally. And so David spent the better part of his 20s dodging Saul's he spent time dodging Saul's repeated attempts on his life. So this week, I encourage you to dive into reading some of the Psalms that David wrote or attributed to David, because many of them were really kind of written in a sense from quarantine, so to speak, or at least from a sense of isolation for sure. So as David is out there isolated, he's just letting all his thoughts out in these poems, which he then often turns into songs, which is pretty cool. So reading the Psalms, I think, are so comforting because they're really just so human. They're super relatable. David often cries and dances for joy within the same poem. So we really see in the Psalms how David deals with these sort of great paradoxes of life. Things like the fact that everyone experiences pain. We don't always see justice in this lifetime. Faith requires trust in what we can't see. So many of these big topics that David really wrestles with. And so we see this whole range of human emotions in David, and yet we also see him really constantly seeking to experience God. And not just to know God, but to really experience him. In Psalm 94:19, he says that when my anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. I love that verse. But so I think we can recognize that it's not just knowledge about God that gives David joy in the midst of his trials. It's experiencing God's presence. So I want to read to us Psalm 57. Psalm 57 was written by David when he was living in an actual cave, which, by the way, if David can survive living in a cave for years, we can survive self-quarantine in Laguna Beach, California. There wasn't a pandemic coming after David, right? But there was a hostile army that was seeking to kill him. So let's listen to what he has to say in Psalm 57. He says in verse 1, "Have mercy on me, O God, have mercy on me, for in you my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He sends from heaven and saves me, rebuking those who hotly pursue me. God sends his love and his faithfulness. I am in the midst of lions. I lie among ravenous beasts, men whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. They spread a net for my feet. I was bowed down in distress. They dug a pit in my path, but they have fallen into it themselves. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. Awake, my soul. Awake, harp and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, reaching to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth." So once again, that's Psalm 57. And I was thinking about this because if I were actually holed up in a cave somewhere and a madman and his army were after me, and if God had promised me something that didn't seem to be coming true, I'd probably not be instinctually writing praise songs, right? And yet we see that David's really choosing to exalt the Lord. So David really has something to teach us about how we are to think in these kinds of situations when our faith is being tested, when we're holed up in a cave. And although David didn't really realize why things were happening the way that they were, he did understand what God wanted from him, which was his heart and his trust and his worship. So that's really the theme, I think, of Psalm 57, that God would be glorified no matter what our circumstances. And I was thinking, David didn't see the cave itself as his refuge. He saw behind that to God as his refuge. So it's not our cozy bedroom or do-it-yourself projects or candles or whatever we're doing right now to comfort us. Those aren't the things that are going to bring us lasting comfort right now. It's going to be our relationship with the Lord. So I just want to encourage us to model what David's doing here by praising God in the midst of his situation. I wrote down Psalm 30, 11 through 12. He says, "You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, that my heart may sing to you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give you thanks forever." So in Psalm 27, David is also talking about sort of this idea of offering praises almost like sacrifices. So I think one thing we can be doing during this time is just finding unique ways to worship God. So sometimes it might feel like a sacrifice, but when we give our time to God, we get so much in return. So some things you could do, you could listen to Chris Lazat's videos. He's going to be uploading on Wednesday nights to the church YouTube channel, which are awesome. You yourself might be musical. You can play a song on your guitar. You could write a poem. You could take a little prayer walk outside while maintaining social distance. You could read more of the Psalms. I encourage you to do that. Maybe start with Psalm 139 if you just need to be reminded of God's love for you right now. So, in conclusion, David did do a lot to kind of keep himself busy living in those caves. He played music, he danced, he cried out to God, he sulked a little, he reflected, he prayed, and mostly he praised. So, I just want to leave you with this, that there's really no one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with life right now. But I do encourage you to think of some creative ways to connect with God, to connect with others. If you feel like it, you could share some of those ways in the comments or underneath this video. But I do want to say one more thing before we close. I think that it's easy to become very self-focused on all the challenges that really come with our current situation. But the truth is, we are so privileged. Most of us live in Laguna Beach in beautiful homes with roofs over our heads and hot meals and family that takes care of us. And crises like this pandemic usually disproportionately affect those who are most vulnerable in our society. But the good news is that there are ways to help. So, for example, the Friendship Shelter downtown, they're in need of things like toilet paper and hand sanitizer. If you can come across any of those things and you want to arrange a drop-off, you can contact me. We can get those items to them. Additionally, many homeless individuals aren't getting fed downtown because there aren't as many people to supply food. And so you could do something like make a bunch of sandwiches and wear protective gloves and drop some off downtown. Or there are just ways to get creative, but to still be really others focused right now. You could also just write like a good old-fashioned letter in the mail, send it to your grandparents, or at least give those grandparents a call on the phone, because there are definitely people who are feeling very afraid and isolated right now and would love to hear from family. So I don't want to go on too long, but those are some ideas there. Another one I thought of is your parents are probably a little stressed right now. Some of them are working from home and have all the kids there throughout the day. So you could be a big help just by sort of watching your siblings or helping out with making dinner, things like that. So just think about how we can really represent Christ during this time and show that love to others. So if you have more ideas, you can put them again in the comments to this video. I'm thinking about doing a Zoom check-in later in the week, so if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know. But that's it for tonight. I'm sad I can't see you at Refuge, but glad that I can check in. So please text me. Don't hesitate to reach out, send me prayer requests, or any questions that you might have. So love you guys, and I'll see you next week.